Hello everybody and welcome back. As always, I am Mateo311 and this is your channel for everything VR related. Today, we'll be discussing the best VR games, including what actually makes them so good, how can VR titles improve going forward, the community split between high production value and overall gameplay, and finally, even after 8 years now, VR games are just starting to find their groove and the best titles are still yet to come. So yeah, we have a ton of topics to go over today. Now there are of course links and timestamps if you want to skip ahead, but let's just start off with some of the best VR games ever made. Obviously, this list is subjective, but in terms of high production value games, the clear choices are Half-life Alyx, Batman Arkham Shadow, and both the Asgard's Wrath and Lone Echo series. But VR actually does exceedingly well in its very own specific niche, with titles like Beat Saber, Pistol Whip, Blade and Sorcery, and Bone Lab. These are titles that are uniquely VR. Most of them just wouldn't work at all or wouldn't be any fun on flat screen. So we could see a clear divide here. There's high production value games that try to emulate what flat screen gaming does, and then there's the uniquely VR titles. And this kind of branches into how the community feels. There's some people who are just addicted to VR mods because they get that high quality game that they're dying for, but they get to experience it in VR, and they're willing to give up things like motion controls. They're even willing to sit there and hold on to one of these game pads and play, which other people think is absolute blasphemy. Could you imagine playing Beat Saber with a gamepad? No, it doesn't make any sense. Now, lucky enough for us VR gamers, these are the two routes that developers are following the most. Some people want immersion level over 9,000, where they have to load every single bullet into their magazine, while others have zero interest breaking a sweat while gaming, and just want the highly immersive perspective that VR offers. Now, currently for those people, PC VR mods, or sometimes the occasional Quest standalone mod, is exactly what they're looking for. I've played through the original Half-Life on my Quest headset, and it was fantastic. But that brings me to a good game is a good game. Sometimes VR makes it better, especially if the mod is solid, and sometimes it's just you're playing a good game. The perfect example that I like to use is Mortal Kombat. It was really solid, but they ported it to the Nintendo Switch, and it's a serious downgrade. But it's still a good game. So a good game remains a good game, no matter the platform. Sometimes it enhances it, sometimes it brings it down. But mods are not a viable business, and everything from the installation, performance, and experience varies greatly. So this is where I'm really excited for the work that Flat the VR Studios is doing. There's an insane amount of potential here, and a game I would never consider trying on flat screen like RoboQuest, I'm actually really excited to experience in VR. John Carmack recently echoed a type of similar statement, where there's just no budget for us to produce AAA style games in VR. It's just not possible right now. Half-life Alyx was this unique outlier. It was Valve being Valve. But he did say there is definitely a market for doing something like a premium add-on. Games get made, and then for maybe a little upcharge, or if you just buy the game flat out, you get VR access. There is the possibility there. You know, it's much easier to take an existing piece of content and then port it to VR than build something from the ground up, especially when you're looking at something that's 50 million to 100 million in budget. You're never going to make that money back in just VR, but you could make back 5 million, 10 million maybe, so it becomes reasonable. But the other side of John Carmack's statement was he talked about how Beat Saber did much more for VR than Half-life Alyx ever did. And Half-life Alyx was amazing, but really it's just a high production value, kind of by the numbers shooter. Yes, they implemented really cool physics, and it's a solid game. Don't get me wrong, I love the experience. However, it's still basically a first-person shooter, and you could have experienced that game in flat, and it still would have been good. Besides the physics, increased immersion, and a handful of motion controls, there's nothing really here that makes this game scream VR. Now compare something like Into the Radius, Bone Lab, Beat Saber, or Blade and Sorcery to Half-life Alyx, and the difference in production value is night and day, but these games offer up a true VR experience that you can't get outside of VR. Conceptually, Beat Saber is so simple. You have two lightsabers and you're chopping blocks. But it's this insane hit that anyone who knows anything about VR has seen before. It's just tapped into something that people love. It's super easy to get into and then super hard to master. Like, they nailed it. It is uniquely VR. And I know some people say, well, it's just an evolution of the dance games. And it's like, no, not really. I could dance without a VR headset, but you really need to be in it to experience the visuals, the hand coordination that comes with trying to smack all those blocks in the right direction. It is an absolutely fantastic experience. And that's the type of magic that VR developers need to learn to tap into even more. So this is why I say the best VR games haven't been made yet. In the past, the idea was just make bigger and better, higher production value games, and people will flock to VR, which didn't really pay off. We did get some bangers like Half-life Alyx, Asgard's Wrath, Stormland, and I'm sure you guys can name a few down in the comments. But it didn't really move the needle and caused headsets to fly off the shelves. We've also been chasing the dream of, I want this game in VR for a couple of years now, which kind of rarely ever paid off. Medal of Honor Above and Beyond was less than fantastic. Assassin's Creed Nexus, while good, really doesn't compare to other titles in the series. And the only game to ever really pull it off was Batman Arkham Shadow. But again, this is a first-party sponsored title by Oculus Studios, so they have an unrealistic budget. It's fine to emulate some flat screen style games. However, you need to put your own unique VR spin on it. I would love to see RTS games come to VR. However, they're just not going to work. You cannot translate something like StarCraft in the VR. That's a game where you're pressing like 300 keys per minute, or probably even more if you're pro. It's not going to work. You have to come up with a very unique control scheme, which no one has nailed yet. That's what I want to see. That's why I'm saying the best VR games aren't made yet, because no one had that light bulb go off with something that seems simple but is actually really complex, like Beat Saber. So to give you my RTS example, I want a game. It could be in mixed reality, it could be fully VR. Either way doesn't matter. Mixed reality works because you get that board game style, but that's fine. Whatever you prefer. But we need to up the control scheme. We need to have like really unique hand gestures that actually are super responsive. Maybe get voice controls in there. Every quest has a microphone. Voice controls are underrated. I actually loved in Half-life Alyx where if you made noise, Jeff followed you, and then there were triggers in the game that would make your character cough, and you have to cover your mouth. And if you didn't cover your mouth, your character coughed and Jeff found you. So really, like, little things like that are awesome, but you got to branch them off into big, broad mechanics. I want to see something like Ender's Game. You know, you have this world around you. You hold up your hand and your units stop, and you could say flyers and point, or whatever the case may be. Someone's got to figure it out. We got to VRify the games. We got to make the solid experiences, and we got to find that balance. You know, I'm currently playing a ton of Path of Exile 2. I would not want to play a game like that exactly one-to-one in VR because I'd be exhausted. You know, you play that game kind of marathon style. VR games are very different. You got to find that right balance. I don't think we should play all our VR games with a gamepad. And I don't think we should be doing every little bit of movement that you'd see in real life. You know, I am a fan of Into the Radius, but sometimes it gets tedious to just sit there and be like, bullet, bullet, bullet. I know it's not that tedious. It's definitely easier than real life, but it's a lot for some people. It's more than they want. And unfortunately, I don't think there's a great middle ground. I think we just really need to push in both directions. We need excellent ports of AAA style games, and we need uniquely VR titles. Now, this is the future I'm envisioning for VR. I think this is our path forward. But if you guys think I'm completely off, let me know down in the description. Also, jump in with some of the games that you recommend or where you think I was totally off in this video, like Into the Radius sucks. No, you're wrong when you say something like that. But, or Until You Fall sucks. No, you're wrong. You're completely wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. Now, jokes aside, guys, I love hearing your feedback. So chime in. And if you like this video, you know what to do. Thumbs up. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. And as always, I'll see you guys on next time.